A desert planet with twin suns.
Why do I sense we've picked up another pathetic life form?
Use my knowledge. Much to learn. You still have.
Welcome back to Twin Sun Talks, folks. I'm your host, Jonah Liu. Thank you so much for listening. And welcome to another one of our character profiles. And today we are going to be profiling the man himself, Mr. Darth Maul. Super excited about it. And so without further ado, let's just dive into ARC Trooper training.
Gentlemen, who wants to be an ARC Trooper? I do, sir!
Alright, so as always, I find it only fair to warn y'all that there will be spoilers for both the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels in this episode. And obviously the movies, but I feel like less people have watched Clone Wars and Rebels. So if you don't mind, then feel free to stick around. But if you don't want to get those spoiled, then go ahead and stop listening. Come back whenever you finish them up. This episode will still be here. But the last thing I want to do is ruin that experience for anybody. So, much like my profiles of Obi-Wan and of Boba, I'm just going to start off with a quick bio for Darth Maul. So his homeworld was Dathomir, his species is Dathomir, he's Zabrak. His master was Darth Sidious, his apprentice was Savage Opress, and his lightsaber color was mainly red. And I say mainly for a reason, but it's a slight spoiler. So I'm going to wait to kind of elaborate on that until later. So as far as the timeline for Darth Maul goes, before the events of The Phantom Menace, he ended up being in Sidious's care one way or another, and how that happened has varied from legend to canon. In Legends, he was given to Sidious by a Night Sister for fear of what Mother Talzin would do to him, just based on what had happened to his brothers. In canon, he was Mother Talzin's son, taken by Sidious at a young age. Either way, he was trained as a Sith Lord in secret, officially trained as an assassin to maintain the rule of two to Darth Plagueis. So basically, if he had been a rule of two, or if he had been trained as a Sith Lord in Darth Plagueis' eyes, that would have been a direct violation of the rule of two, where there can only be two Sith, one master and one apprentice, but there could be multiple assassins that weren't trained to the same power level, much like Ventress and Savage. And then, so in that process, Maul was subjected to intense pain and suffering to hone his anger. He became a very rageful being. In The Phantom Menace, so in the movies now, he is sent by Sidious to hunt down Qui-Gon and his company and his group that he was with. And he engaged in the first known conflict between a Sith and a Jedi with Qui-Gon on Tatooine whenever they're boarding the Nabooian ship to go to Coruscant. And he duels Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan on Naboo later in the movie. And after Qui-Gon is dealt a fatal blow, Obi-Wan triumphs over Maul by cutting him in half, and he falls down a reactor shaft. Notice I didn't say he kills him. He just defeats him. Because after his duel with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, Maul is kept alive purely by his rage and hatred for Kenobi. He made his way to Lotho Minor, because he ended up in some sort of trash compactor after falling down the reactor shaft. And Lotho Minor is a junk world in the Outer Rim, so it was basically the entire planet was one big dump. He made himself mechanical legs using trash dumped onto the planet, and he recruited a being called Morley, who was a snake-like sentient who lured prey to Maul, and Maul would share his meals with the serpent. Kind of as payment for his work. And then in the Clone Wars, he is rescued from Lotho Minor by his brother Savage Opress, and Maul at this time had been driven insane by his anger and years of isolation, because keep in mind, this is, let's do the math. So there's 10 years between Attack of the Clones and The Phantom Menace, and then there's so if he's 19, I think that he's 24, Anakin is 24, so that's like 5 years of the Clone Wars. So at the point where we see Maul, that's probably 2-ish years. So that's like 12 years cut in half and by himself, which is pretty wild. And so, yeah, he's kind of gone insane. He's lost it a bit. But then Savage takes him off Lotho Minor, and his mind is restored by Mother Talzin, and he's given new legs made up of repurposed battle droid parts. And then several attempts at revenge against Kenobi leave Maul and Savage stranded in space. They try to lure him to Iridonia, and then they try to team up with Hondo and his pirates. But ultimately, they end up stranded in space in an escape pod, and they're rescued by Pre Vizsla and the Death Watch. They form an alliance and establish the Shadow Collective, which is a crime syndicate made of many different crime families, such as Black Sun, the Pikes, and the Hutts, and then, of course, the Death Watch as well. After overthrowing Duchess Satine and taking control of Mandalore, which was ultimately the Death Watch's goal, Maul duels Pre Vizsla for control of the planet and control of the Shadow Collective and defeats him, claiming the Darksaber and control of Mandalore. So that's why I said primarily his lightsabers were red. Technically speaking, he also used a black saber in the form of the Darksaber. After luring Kenobi to Mandalore and killing Duchess Satine in front of him, Maul and Savage are confronted by Darth Sidious. And Sidious kills Savage and takes Maul prisoner. The next bit is not technically in the Clone Wars show, but it's in unreleased episodes of the Clone Wars. And it's a comic series called the Son of Dathomir. And so Maul is freed by his Mandalorian underlings after the events of the Son of Dathomir comics, and Mother Talzin is killed by General Grievous, and the Shadow Collective is dissolved. During the Siege of Mandalore, Maul is captured by Ahsoka Tano after a joint effort by the 332nd Company and Bo-Katan's Death Watch splinter group, and he escapes Republic captivity due to the events of Order 66. And if you want, I very much simplified all of these events, so if you want to learn more about them, you go ahead and watch the Clone Wars or read the Son of Dathomir comics. They're all really, really cool, and if you'd like me to talk about them more in depth, go ahead and email me, comment. My email is twinsuntalks@gmail.com, or you can comment on Instagram @twinsuntalks or YouTube Twin Sun Talks Podcast, any of that stuff. Just get in touch with me, and I'll definitely get that to y'all eventually. After the Clone Wars, Maul forms a new crime syndicate called Crimson Dawn, and then in Solo, a Star Wars story, we see that he's the one pulling the strings behind Trident Voss and Kira. And then before Rebels, at some point, he goes into exile and makes his way to Malachor. And then in Rebels, he meets Ezra on Malachor and kills some Inquisitors before blinding Kanan Jarrus and manipulating Ezra into obtaining a Sith holocron, which he later combines with a Jedi holocron to learn the whereabouts of one Obi-Wan Kenobi. Then he brings Ezra to Dathomir to ascertain Kenobi's location, which in this scene, it's actually the main tagline for this podcast, which I'll play right now.
A desert planet with twin suns.
So that's actually pulled from the scene where Ezra and Maul are on Dathomir. And so I thought that was kind of funny. And also, they're actually, Maul's actually in one of the zingers for the segments, so I'll play that for Visions. This isn't a Visions segment, but I'll just play it for y'all.
To continue, we need one singular vision. My vision.
And that clip is pulled from the Clone Wars. Essentially, it's in Season 5, Episode 1, called Revival, where essentially Maul and Savage are having a conversation about who's going to be in control in their partnership, who's going to be master and who's going to be apprentice, and ultimately, obviously, Maul chooses himself and says that his vision is the one that they're going to be following. So after Ezra and Maul visit Dathomir and Maul ascertains the location of Kenobi, he then travels to Tatooine and he confronts Kenobi. And he is defeated in a short duel while attempting to kill Obi-Wan using the same move that he used to kill Qui-Gon. And I think that honestly people kind of complain about this fight because it's too short. But honestly, I think it's really beautiful just because it shows, A, how powerful Obi-Wan is, B, how reckless and hateful and rageful Maul still is, and then also just shows Kenobi isn't messing around. Like, if you threaten Luke, That's his job. And that's the only thing that he's there to do, is to protect Luke, and he's not going to pull any punches. And so I think that it's a really cool ending, just because it's how it should go. Obi-Wan should just annihilate him right off the bat. In this case, at least, because he has so much reason to. But that's the end of Maul's timeline, obviously, because he's dead. Moving on to some various facts that I've gleaned from Maul. His timeline's the beef of this episode, but his hatred for the Jedi is born out of resentment for them not finding him as a child, because basically, if they had found him, he wouldn't have suffered under Sidious. They would have saved him from all of the pain and suffering that he endured to become a Sith. He is a master of Form 7 of lightsaber combat, Juyo, which was forbidden by the Jedi Order. Mace Windu practiced a variation of Form 7, but it wasn't the true Form 7, which was primarily used by the Sith, due to the fact that it was extremely aggressive and acrobatic and relied heavily on the dark side. Maul had two brothers, one being Farrell and one being Savage Opress. Farrell was killed by Savage as a test of Savage's loyalty to the Night Sisters after his transformation. And you can see that in Savage's initial arc in the Clone Wars. Maul was in possession of the Darksaber up until Rebels, whenever it was repossessed by Sabine Wren. And Maul managed to capture Dooku and briefly turn him to his side in hopes of overthrowing Sidious. Together, that's in the Son of Dathomir comic that I mentioned earlier in this episode. He mastered a saber staff, which is the double-sided lightsaber, which was unorthodox and more aggressive than a single blade. And he was capable of using Force Lightning, which obviously we see Palpatine and Dooku use, but preferred to forego range attacks like Force Lightning and like various Force attacks in general, because he instead enjoyed relishing in close combat and the fear and pain of his enemies. He essentially liked to brutalize and really make the fight personal, and kind of demoralize his enemies and make them suffer, essentially, which is pretty brutal. But that's about all that I have about my profile on Darth Maul. I can go more in depth about anything in this episode that I kind of skimmed over if y'all would like, but I don't want to ramble for like an hour, because obviously there's a lot of lore that I could talk about with Darth Maul, and there are a lot of comics that I didn't mention. I stayed a little more mainstream. But I hope that y'all learned a few new things. Maul's a super interesting character, and I can't wait to see more about him. There's rumors that we're getting an animated show about him and Crimson Dawn, which is going to be pretty dope if that's real. So here's hoping that that's going to actually happen. But who knows? I'll update y'all if we get any sort of confirmation. But that's about all that I have for this episode. I bet this wouldn't be a proper episode if I didn't leave you with just a little bit more. So my more actually comes from a cameo video that I got from my brother Jeb last year for his birthday. And I got it from Sam Witwer, who voices Darth Maul in the Clone Wars and also in Solo and Rebels. And he's a super cool guy. He knows a lot about Star Wars. He also voiced Starkiller in the old Starkiller video games, and then he voiced the son in the Clone Wars as well from the Mortis arc. But he gave some pretty cool insight. Unfortunately, I can't use the clip in here because of Cameo's rules on redistributing their videos. But he essentially pointed out how Maul remained loyal to Sidious even after he was betrayed by him. After the events of the Lawless arc in the Clone Wars, he could have revealed to the Jedi who Sidious was, and how to defeat him. And it's unclear what his motivation for not doing that is. It could be his fear for him, or any number of things. But at the end of the day, he only really considered doing it when Ahsoka was potentially going to join him. And And that's another interesting thing, is that Maul really had the best interests for the galaxy in mind. Well, maybe not once he took control, but he was really the only one with a plan to stop Sidious, because he was the only one who really knew who Sidious was. But I digress. It's a pretty cool thing. But that's about all that I have. Make sure you stay tuned this Wednesday for our next Book of Boba Fett review and breakdown. Go ahead and check out our Instagram page. We're doing a 31-day Star Wars challenge, which is still going on. And so if you haven't already, go ahead and follow us at Twin Sun Talks, and go ahead and comment your today is day 17, so it's going to be your favorite Sith. So go ahead and drop a comment there. It should be a fun time, and make sure you keep coming back and checking out what each day moving forward is. That's about all that I have. You've taken your first steps into a larger world. May the Force be with you, and I will see y'all in the next episode. Bye, friends.